Catastrophic bushfires have ravaged much of Australia, and firefighters are working tirelessly to save lives and homes. But while many were still mourning the deaths of the people who died in the fires, a heated debate broke out about the cause. The Greens blamed both major parties for Australia's emissions policy, which Greens leader Richard Di Natale said caused the fires. Adam Bandt, a Melbourne Greens MP, mimicked his remarks.
This government has had every opportunity to minimise the risk of these catastrophic fires, and instead it has chosen to pour fuel on the fire. Michael McCormack and Scott Morrison bear some responsibility for what is happening at the moment because they have done everything in their power to make these kind of catastrophic bushfires more likely.
Barnaby Joyce, a Nationals MP, blamed Greens' policies getting in the way of the practicalities of fighting a fire and for making hazard reduction activities harder.
Certain, let's call them conservation policies or green policies, that I think have exacerbated this fire. One is the lack of controlled burns, fire reduction burns, because as you know, if you keep on piling vegetation, dry vegetation on top of dry vegetation, which was never burnt as the Aboriginals did when they were here, they were very aware of the dangers this caused, then when a fire does come, and they always do come, they are horrific. They are like a holocaust.
Former fire chiefs have blamed climate change and government inaction.
We're calling on the federal government to take emergency measures to equip our firefighters and emergency personnel with the tools they need to keep lives and property safe. But we're also calling on the government to take urgent action on the fundamental problem that's leading to these catastrophic fires, and that's climate change.
What's very unusual is that these fires are now impacting on areas that haven't known fire for millennia. There's old growth forests, rainforests, there's alpine areas, sphagnum bogs that have been impacted by the fires. And there are areas where normally, swampy areas which would normally hold the fire are now so dry that there's no way that they can hold the fire, and putting a lot of strain on firefighters in the field.
Are they all deflecting, or do some of them have a reasonable argument? Firstly, the bushfires are unprecedented, not in scale but for the time of year. So far, the bushfires this November have killed 4 people. The 3 worst bushfires in Australia's history were Black Saturday, which killed 173 people, Ash Wednesday, which killed 75, and Black Tuesday, which killed 62. All 3 of these took place in early to mid-February. So why the outbreak of bushfires in November? Well, Geoscience Australia says bushfires can originate from both human activity and natural causes, with lightning the predominant natural source, accounting for about half of all ignitions in Australia. Fires of human origin, it continues, currently account for the remainder and are classified as accidental or deliberate. Fire experts say the current bushfires are the result of lightning, carelessness and arson.
What we're now seeing is that fires are burning in places that are very hard to get to. So the cause of those fires we're now seeing are due to something known as dry lightning strikes. Now, I've had 39 years of Tasmania Fire Service and I didn't see too many dry lightning strikes earlier on in my career, but now, and due to climate change, we're seeing this as a regular event.
New South Wales Police said 12 bushfires on Tuesday were deliberately lit by arsonists. They said they're following up on hundreds of incident reports from Crime Stoppers, meaning many more could have started intentionally or unintentionally. Australia is also tinder dry, with 99.4% of New South Wales and 66.1% of Queensland in drought. Government expenditure could be playing a role as well. Under the 2019-2020 New South Wales state budget, Fire and Rescue had its capital expenditure budget cut by $28.5 million, or 35%. The Rural Fire Service had its capital expenditure budget cut by $49.9 million, or 75%. Then there's the issue of hazard reduction burns, where fire-prone areas are burnt ahead of time to reduce the risk of fuel if a fire were to break out.
Control burn. Now, speaking to people from the Environment Department, and they say, well, they won't go on the record, but they say it's just so bureaucratic.
Hazard reduction burns clearly have a role to play in mitigating the risk of fires. But climate change could also be a factor for these ravenous blazes. A 2018 IPCC report predicts climate change will reduce opportunities for controlled burning and extend fire season length. It also forecasts the number of days with very high and extreme fire weather will increase in a changing climate. The greatest changes, the IPCC report said, will be in areas where fire is dependent on weather rather than the presence of fuel sources. A warming climate would also boost the risk of fire by shrinking the temperature needed for a fire to ignite. For example, if a blade of grass ignites at 100 degrees Celsius and temperatures have increased, the heat from an ignition source, like lightning, doesn't have to raise the temperature of grass as high to catch a light. It would also mean fires spread easier and faster, as the former fire chief said.
Fires are literally off the scale of fire danger in this warming planet.
So there's something going on, and certainly climate change is exacerbating the very, very dry conditions that we're all experiencing. Bushfires are a symptom of climate change.
Ultimately, the unprecedented fires engulfing Australia are likely the culmination of climate change, the decisions of governments, constraints on preventative measures, and either human error or arsonists.
Scott Morrison could have a national climate agreement before the end of the year. If Scott Morrison took a leaf out of John Howard's book, he could say these terrible tragedies are something we should do everything in our power to avoid happening ever again.
Perhaps after the fires die down, the Prime Minister will unveil a grand plan. Philip Ritchie, Sky News.